Hello, I'm Langston, and I'm back on my channel, Military Election Forecasting. Today, I'm going to be talking about Kamala Harris's Essence Festival speech and everything she went over and why it's very important. So, Essence is a Black media outlet which is dedicated towards empowering Black women. So, Kamala Harris has been the face of Essence for the last couple of years, actually. Her and Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama. So, Essence, which is a festival mainly dedicated to promoting Black women across the country. Kamala Harris went to Essence for her third year in a row to talk about the issues of the primarily Black community and the Biden administration's plans for dealing with Black voters in the future. So this was something that was very normal, but what I really wanted to point out was someone is running for president, a Republican, Larry Elder, who ran for governor in California back in the California recall election back in 2021. He warned Democrats about trying to attack Kamala Harris, and I thought it was really shocking that a Republican would say that. Obviously, when they're running for president and they're trying to defeat the Biden administration, but Larry Elder is pretty aware when it comes to politics. At least something I can say from his perspective. And he mentioned that Kamala Harris's future ticket might have already be punched thanks to Black voters. Many people took this as him somewhat being jealous of Kamala Harris because he talked about Kamala Harris being so popular in the Black community, which is something that obviously he does not have. And it seemed like he was somewhat, envious of her. But what he said was very valid. And you see a lot of people, some Republicans talking about dropping Kamala Harris, like replacing Kamala Harris with someone else, which would be the end of the Democratic Party because a lot of these Black women voters and Black voters in general, a lot of these voters only voted for Joe Biden because he picked a Black woman as vice president. And a lot of people are shocked by that. But I'm from DeKalb County in Georgia. Let me just pull this county. Majority Black county in the Atlanta area, which is the gives Democrats the largest net votes in the state of Georgia. And I know a lot of people that only wanted to vote for Joe Biden because he picked a Black woman as vice president. So, for Republicans to just drop someone like Kamala Harris after everything that she's handed Democrats on a presidential platter, like some of these voters, like we just go to, and even in the Rust Belt, like some of these voters in Detroit, in Milwaukee, and etc., like in the Philadelphia area, she handed these voters to Joe Biden on a silver platter, and to get rid of her would just be so stupid. The same way getting rid of Mike Pence would have been stupid for Donald Trump, who really needed an evangelical vote. Joe Biden was put in office by Black voters in South Carolina. He was put, he won the Democratic primary based off of Black voters in South Carolina and Virginia and etc. He won the presidency based off of high turnout from Black voters in big cities like Detroit, like Atlanta, like Milwaukee, like Philadelphia. Democrats flipped the Senate because of Black voters in the Georgia runoffs. They held on to the Senate again because of Black voters in Pennsylvania and in Georgia. So for Republicans to be for Democrats to be trying to get rid of Kamala Harris would be the absolute end of the Democratic Party. Like that would be something that Joe Biden would never recover from. And Larry Elder actually went in depth talking about this, which was something very shocking. He said her polls are at least 70% amongst Black voters. I suspect even higher amongst Black women, which is obvious because she is that. And don't forget, the first primary for the Democrats in South Carolina, where 60% of voters are Black, and most of them are Black women. They love Kamala Harris and will very much resent if she is perceived as having been kicked to the curb by a white person like Mayor Pete and Gavin Newsom. To replace Kamala Harris with a white male candidate or even a white female candidate, regardless, would just be so disrespectful. I think in terms of how it's perceived, at least from the Black community's perspective, they would never forgive Joe Biden for that, especially when they don't even they're not even approving of Joe Biden now. So to replace a historical candidate with someone this generic would just spell doom for the Democrats, especially in places where they would need Black voters to turn out in high margins to win. And I was just really shocked that he brought this up. And what he said that really was that many people brought up was he said Black media loves Kamala Harris, which is very true. Like if you go on media outlets, she's very liked amongst a lot of Black media outlets. Something I've really paid attention to. Like they really like her, and many people do have a problem with her. Like people think that, like some people who are Democrats, but obviously voted for Joe Biden, that did feel like Joe Biden took their vote for granted. A lot of people think that Joe Biden used her. To get black votes for his campaign. Like they think that he used her to get the black vote, which is another like testament you'll see from a lot of black people that disapprove of Joe Biden. Like they think that she's like a tool that he uses to get black voters. But this is what Kamala Harris is very valuable for Democrats. And they know this. This is why Joe Biden picked her. That's why he put Ketanji Brown Jackson on the Supreme Court. That's why he made Juneteenth a national holiday. You know, he's really came up with all of these policies to try to keep black voters firm in his column. But as we saw in the 2022 midterm elections, that, and even in Virginia back in 2021, that did not prove successful. But obviously with having her on the ballot, that would definitely help, especially in a presidential election. But it is worth noting that Democrats have struggled with turnout, even with running very strong candidates for that demographic, whether we're talking about Raphael Warnock and Sherry Beasley in North Carolina. So that is worth noting. But she talked a lot about the Supreme Court overturning affirmative action, talked about the new voting maps in Alabama and Louisiana. She talked about the black maternal health crisis, which is oftentimes talked about, how in America, black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than their white female counterparts. She talked a lot about healthcare. She talked about banning assault rifles, a lot of democratic policies. And obviously, in a black media space like Essence, like she was beloved, like, you know, she got standing ovations and etc. But it is worth noting that this is a predominantly black, and not even just black female space. So this is Kamala Harris's base. But this is very important for Democrats in the future and obviously in the Senate elections. So I highlighted the states where the black voter importance is the most important in a presidential election. And those states are obviously Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia. Black voters are very important in other southern states like South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Tennessee. But obviously, there are not enough of them to realistically win, in my opinion. So I don't realistically counter those states. And obviously in the Rust Belt, in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. In 2016, Hillary Clinton primarily lost the Rust Belt because she really struggled with getting urban black voters out in the big cities and the Rust Belt out to the polls. And with her having massive drop-offs with voters in these big cities, allowed Donald Trump to have narrow victories in these 3 states. And after that, Democrats decided to motivate themselves to picking black candidates in the Rust Belt, which is how Mandela Barnes and Austin Davis and Garland Gerkreis came to be lieutenant governors of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Ever since then, Democrats have prioritized black voters in places like Milwaukee and Philadelphia and Detroit to give Democrats a sizable advantage in the Rust Belt. In Virginia, Democrats really have struggled with black turnout in 2021 and 2022, obviously with Terry McAuliffe primarily coming up short because of that, which I talked about in a video yesterday. But we saw earlier this year in a majority black district, Democrats really destroyed Republicans in that district in Virginia, which is very enthusiastic for them in the future. Georgia and North Carolina are states where the Democratic coalition is totally based off of black voters, where in Georgia, Democrats were able to flip Georgia on the Senate level and presidential level back in 2020, primarily due because of record-breaking black turnout, which Kamala Harris had a lot to play in motivating a lot of those voters to come out to the polls. And in North Carolina, Democrats have just really not did what they were supposed to do with with black voters. I think that North Carolina is really sad how Democrats have really struggled with getting out their base in North Carolina. But even with them struggling, the state is still narrowing, even if it's slow. It's still taking place. North Carolina is a state where Democrats have a lot of potential when they can get their base out to the polls, considering that Democrats would have won North Carolina if they would have had the same electorate that Joe Biden had in 2020, which was also a bad electorate. So talking about this really just talks about Kamala Harris and what Joe Biden is using her to do, which is shore up the black community for the South Carolina Democratic primary and the future elections to come. Kamala Harris has been just blasted on black media outlets this last couple of weeks. Like every time you just scroll on a black media outlet, she's being talked about and defended. And it's really helping her numbers in the black community. And you're seeing her numbers rise. And obviously when you're numbers are being helped in that community. You're going to see Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's approval rise in Georgia, in North Carolina, in the Rust Belt states, where Democrats rely on them tremendously. But black voters, which are usually the reason Democrats do end up coming up short, there's also other factors. Black voters have a very big impact in the Rust Belt and in the South, primarily Georgia, North Carolina, and in Virginia. But in some other swing states, which you see I did not fill out, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, Hispanic Latino voters are going to be the primary Democratic voter base that Democrats will be relying on in 2024. So Democrats also need to come up with a way to appeal to those voters and, have certain rallies to turn out those voters in an election. So that will be another future topic and another thing that Democrats in the Biden administration be worrying about. But I wanted to talk about this very important topic with Kamala Harris and her going to this Essence Festival, which she always does, and why it's very important for Democrats in the future. So thank you guys so much for tuning to my video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure to have a nice day, you guys. Goodbye.